Once upon a time, in the heart of Lagos, a young woman named Faith stood at the rusted gate of their family compound in Mushin, Lagos, gripping a brown envelope that carried her dream. She had just received her admission letter to study medicine at the University of Ibadan. The envelope was creased from the number of times she had opened it, smiled at it, cried over it, and tucked it under her pillow like it was a piece of gold. It was her dream, a dream that had felt unreachable for years, especially after their parents' car crash 3 months ago, and they didn't make it alive. They were buried with death and buried without warning. Her siblings had barely cried at the funeral. They were too young to understand the weight of what had just happened. It was Faith who had to grow up overnight. It was Faith who had to start asking herself questions no 19-year-old girl should be forced to answer. Where will rent come from now? What about school fees for her 3 younger siblings? And what about her dream? She had sat on the rooftop that night, watching the distant glow of Lagos street lights flicker like stars. Her hands were trembling, her heart torn between her future and her family. Then came the sound. A small knock. She turned. Junior, the youngest, only 8 years old, clutched her waist and asked, "Are we going to be okay?" In that moment, something inside her broke, and something else grew. She wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "Yes, we'll be okay. I promise." That promise would become her burden. Faith tore the admission letter in half the next morning. She did it slowly, deliberately, as if killing a part of herself piece by piece. She became mother, father, sister, and provider. She cleaned houses in the morning, taught children in the afternoons, and sold puff-puff and zobo by the roadside in the evenings. She gave up her textbooks for detergent, her mirror for firewood, her dreams for rent, but she didn't complain, not once. She woke up at 4 a.m. and prayed, cooked, packed lunch boxes, and still managed to braid Precious's hair before school. And she always smiled when her siblings left the house. That smile was her disguise. One day, Daniel, the eldest of the 3 siblings, came home with a result slip. He had come first in his WAEC mock exams. "I did it," he beamed. "First in the whole school." Faith screamed. She hugged him and danced in the living room with unwashed plates in the sink and beans still burning on the stove. "Faith," he said suddenly, gripping her shoulders, "I will make you proud. I'll become a lawyer one day and take care of you. You will see." She believed him. She needed to. But Lagos had a way of testing good people. 2 months later, their house roof started leaking, and Faith had no money. The raining season had just begun. Rain poured into their room that made Daniel and Junior develop cold. "I will fix it tomorrow," Faith said. "I promise." Faith sold her mother's sewing machine. Then she went to Alaba Market and begged to be given cleaning jobs in one of the electronic stores. When one man offered her double pay to spend the night, she walked away with tears in her eyes and a growl in her stomach. She returned that night with bruised feet but enough money to repair the roof. Her dignity was intact, barely, but intact. 5 years passed like sand through tired fingers. Faith never went back to school. Instead, she raised her siblings like a single mother raising triplets. Daniel got into law school at UNLAG. Precious, smart and ambitious, secured a scholarship to study accounting. Junior blossomed into a brilliant science student in SS2 with dreams of becoming a pilot. They called her Mama Fake in the neighborhood. A girl who never lived her life, only carried others on her back. Sometimes, she would stare into the mirror and wonder, where did my life go? But then Junior would come in and hug her randomly. Or Daniel would send her a voice note. "Don't ever think we don't appreciate you, sis. One day, I'll build you a house. Faith lived on those crumbs of love. The day of Daniel's law school graduation was like a dream. Faith wore a borrowed gown and weaved her hair with the help of Mama Nkechi, their neighbor. Her slippers were old, but her joy was new. At the ceremony, she sat in the back row, smiling like a proud mother. Daniel mounted the stage and took the microphone for a short speech. He laughed nervously and said, "I want to thank everyone who helped me get here, especially my mentor, my uncle in the US, and of course, my only sister, Precious, who believed in me from day one." Faith's smile froze. She looked around. Maybe he meant something else? Maybe it was a mistake. Then she saw him walk off the stage and hug Precious in front of the crowd. She was wearing a bright red dress and sunglasses, smiling like a queen. Faith stood up. Her legs shook. She walked out of the auditorium and leaned against the wall. And for the first time in years, she cried not from exhaustion, but from heartbreak. Back at home that night, Daniel came in late. Faith had made his favorite, egusi and pounded yam. He looked tired and a bit guilty. "Congratulations," she said, her voice low. "Thanks," he replied without looking at her. Faith hesitated. "Daniel, I heard your speech." He stiffened. "Look, I didn't plan the words. It just came out that way. You said Precious was your only sister." "She's the one who was there for me, Faith. You don't get it." Faith stared at him. "I don't get it. I was there for you when nobody else was." He looked away, avoiding her eyes. "Yeah, but sometimes being around you just reminds me of how hard life used to be. I'm trying to move forward." The plate of food slipped from her hands. It shattered on the ground, and so did her heart. She stayed up all night, sitting in the kitchen. The wall clock ticked loudly, each second louder than the last. Outside, Lagos danced with horns and sirens, but inside that house, silence screamed. Faith finally understood something that terrified her more than poverty or hunger. Her love, her sacrifice, it had become invisible. But just as she rose to leave the kitchen, her eyes caught something in the corner of the room. Daniel's backpack, half open, a brown file stuck out. She picked it up. Inside were property documents. She blinked. The house was no longer in her name. The title deed had been transferred to Daniel Okoro 2 months ago. Her hands trembled. On top of the file was a receipt from a real estate agent and a contract. He had sold their father's house without telling her, without her signature. And the buyer's possession date? Next week. Faith couldn't breathe. She fell to her knees, gasping for air, the edges of her vision turning black. Everything spun. Her heart pounded like war drums in her chest. They were about to be evicted, and she didn't even know it. Faith stood in the center of the small kitchen, clutching the brown file like it was burning her fingers. The room felt colder than usual. Even the fridge, always humming noisily in the corner, had fallen silent, as if the house itself was ashamed. Daniel had sold their parents' house, her home, without telling her, without asking. She had scrubbed the floors of that house till her fingers bled, starved herself to keep the gas cylinder filled, turned down a life so her siblings could have one, and this was how he repaid her. She should have confronted him, but she couldn't even form the words. Instead, she sat on the floor till morning, arms around her knees, eyes wide open. Her mind played a loop of memories. Daniel coughing in the cold when he had malaria, her staying up all night sponging his body, praying for God not to take another parent from them. She had even donated blood when the hospital couldn't find a match fast enough. She had given him life, and now he was selling hers. A few days later, Precious returned from school for a short holiday. Her beauty had grown, polished now by university life, Instagram filters and confidence. She walked in with a wheeled bag, oversized sunglasses on her face, even though the sun was gone, and a phone pressed to her ear. Faith met her with a tight hug. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "Yeah, it was last minute," she said, barely making eye contact. Later that evening, Faith decided to talk to her. "Do you know Daniel sold the house?" Precious stopped painting her nails. "Yes." Faith blinked. "You knew?" "Yes," she said again, her tone sharp. "Look, Faith, you are not our mother. This house belongs to all of us." Faith stared in disbelief. "So that's what I am now? Just someone who helped you get through school?" "Please don't make this dramatic." Precious rolled her eyes. "You've always acted like a martyr. You chose to drop out. Nobody begged you." That sentence struck like lightning. You think I chose this life?" Precious stood up and faced her. "Yes, and now it's time we move on. You should too." Faith didn't cry that night. She had run out of tears. She went to her room and wrote in her journal, something she hadn't done in years. "I gave up everything for them, and now I'm a burden. I used to be their lifeline. Now I'm a reminder of where they came from. I see it in their eyes. Shame." The next morning, Faith walked outside and saw a for sale sign being hammered into the compound wall. She stormed out to the street and tore it down. The agents shouted at her. She shouted louder. Neighbors watched in silence as the woman who used to bring food to their kids was now screaming in the street, barefoot, in tears. It was Precious who came out and dragged her back in. "Please don't embarrass us." Faith laughed. "Us? You think I care about embarrassment? You are selling the house I raised you in like it's a wrapper you've outgrown." But Precious didn't flinch, and that silence said it all. A week later, Junior came home from boarding school for midterm break. His voice had deepened. He walked differently now, head up, phone always in hand, AirPods in his ears. "Junior," Faith smiled, "you've grown so much." "Yeah," he said casually, barely hugging her. He dropped his bag and went straight into his room. That night, Faith cooked his favorite, jollof rice with fried plantain and turkey. He didn't touch it. "I don't eat home food much anymore," he muttered. Faith sat across from him, watching, stunned. "What's happening to all of you?" Junior looked up. "You are too controlling, sis. You act like we owe you our lives." Faith's fork dropped. "Oh, me?" Junior's face was blank. "You always talk like you sacrificed everything, but we didn't ask you to. It was your decision. We didn't force you." Her hand trembled under the table. "I raised you." "Yeah, and now it's time we live ours." The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like slow poison in her water. One day, she walked into her room and found her books gone, the novels she held on to since secondary school, her journals, even her father's old framed picture, all boxed and shoved into the backyard. They said we need to start packing, the agent told her. Packing? She wasn't even told when the handover would happen. Daniel hadn't come home in weeks. His number was always busy. Precious said he was handling paperwork. Faith was left in the house like an unpaid tenant. One night, she couldn't take it anymore. She walked to Daniel's new apartment, one he had rented in Lekki, with part of the money from selling the house. She knocked. A girl opened the door. Slim, expensive wig, nose piercing. The smell of perfume floated out behind her. "Who are you?" the girl asked. I'm his sister. I need to see Daniel." The girl frowned. "He's not home, and his only sister lives in Abuja. Are you from church?" Faith didn't answer. She walked away, her chest hollow, her knees weak. She collapsed on the roadside bench and wept. Weeks passed. They moved out, and they didn't even tell her when. Faith came home one afternoon to find strangers inside her compound, painting, drilling, renovating. She ran in barefoot, shouting, "Where are my things?" A worker pointed to the backyard. "In the dustbin, madam." She rushed outside. Her journals, her clothes, her framed certificate, her parents' wedding photo, all dumped and soggy in the rain. Faith picked up one of the books, her mother's Bible, and cradled it in her arms. A man approached her. "Are you Miss Faith Okoro?" She nodded. He handed her an envelope. Eviction, by order of the new property owner. Faith had nowhere to go. Her friends were all married or abroad. She couldn't return to her old cleaning jobs. They had new girls now, younger and faster. She slept at a church for 3 nights. On the 4th, her phone buzzed. "Daniel," for the first time in weeks. She answered, heart racing. "Faith," he said coldly, "you need to stop making a scene. You can't be showing up at people's houses and acting crazy. It's not healthy." She couldn't believe her ears. "You left me homeless." "No, you left yourself homeless. You never built a future." Silence. He continued, "If you need anything, I can send you 50,000 naira to get a place for now. But please, stay out of our lives." Faith stared at the phone screen for a full minute. And then she laughed, a loud, bitter laugh. 50,000 naira. That was the price of her years, of her dreams, of her soul. She sold the only gold necklace her mother left her, rented a single room in a slum. Water came from a bucket, light from a lantern, hope from nowhere. Yet, she woke up every day and said to herself, "You are not done yet." She bought a notebook and wrote this on the first page. "I gave them everything. They gave me silence. But my story isn't over. It's just begun." One Sunday morning, while walking barefoot to a local kiosk, Faith fainted. Dehydrated, weak, malnourished. A woman helped her up. Mama Grace, a retired teacher who now sold akara by the roadside. She took Faith in, gave her pap, and listened. When Faith told her everything, the old woman said, "Child, you forgot yourself for too long. Now it's time to remember who you are meant to be." She handed her a flyer, an adult scholarship program for women over 25. "Apply," she said. "There's still something left in you." Faith read the flyer, then looked up at the sky. God, is there really something left? 2 weeks later, she received a call. She had been accepted. Back to school. At last. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's shadow, but as Faith Okoro. That night, she stood in front of a mirror for the first time in years. Her face was thinner, her eyes dull, but there was a fire building. And just when she smiled for the first time in weeks, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We know where you stay. You better stop talking nonsense about us. Stay quiet or it will get worse." Faith froze. Her hands shook. Was that Daniel? Or Precious? Or Junior? Why were they trying to silence her? Has she become a threat? What were they hiding? The night the anonymous threat arrived, Faith didn't sleep. She sat upright on the cold cement floor of her room, clutching her phone and Bible to her chest like they were weapons. Her eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, as if betrayal could crawl from beneath the bed. She had nothing to lose anymore. Not a house, not siblings, not even her name. But one thing remained unbroken in her will. And now, even that was being threatened. She thought she had lost her story. But this message confirmed something else. They were afraid of her. The next morning, she dressed in a faded shirt and long skirt and walked the long distance to the Women's Development Center. The scholarship orientation began with 20 women, each with different stories. Widows, abandoned wives, single mothers, rape survivors. But as they introduced themselves, Faith sat frozen, unsure of what to say, until it was her turn. She stood up slowly and said, "My name is Faith. I gave up my life so others could build theirs. And when they succeeded, they erased me." The room fell silent. And then one woman clapped. Then another. And another. Tears filled Faith's eyes as the room erupted in applause. It was the first time in years anyone had seen her. Weeks turned into months. Faith studied hard. Science courses, public speaking, IT literacy. She walked miles, fetched water with children, ate bread soaked in water for dinner, but never stopped learning. And then one day, something unexpected happened. A social worker from the Women's Center approached her. "Faith, there's a conference happening next month. Theme? Silent Strength. Stories that changed us. We want you to speak." Faith blinked. "Me? Yes, your story. It needs to be heard." The day of the conference arrived. Faith stood backstage, her nerves screaming. She wore a second-hand suit donated by Mama Grace and borrowed low heels that were slightly too tight. The auditorium was packed. Cameras, journalists, influencers, NGO heads, and students. Faith was called to the stage. Her hands trembled. Her knees buckled. But when she took the microphone and looked into the crowd, she saw women who had lived in silence like her. And suddenly, she wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm not here because I'm strong. I'm here because I was broken, but I didn't die." She spoke of her parents' deaths, of giving up her future, of raising her siblings, of watching them succeed and erase her. She spoke with no bitterness, only truth. When people you love betray you, it's not just your heart that breaks, it's your identity. But I've learned that the worst betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those who call you family and treat you like furniture. The room was silent. Some wiped tears. Some nodded. Faith paused, voice shaking. I'm not here to ask for pity. I'm here to remind every woman, you are not invisible. You are not replaceable. And you are not done. That night, her speech was posted on social media by a youth advocate. By morning, it had over 100,000 views. By evening, it was on Twitter trends. #Faith is not forgotten. Influencers reposted it. Bloggers wrote think pieces. Talk shows debated it. And just like that, Faith became a voice. The girl who was thrown away became the woman the world listened to. And then, the unexpected happened. Her siblings called, one by one. Daniel's voice was quiet. Can we talk? Faith didn't reply. He texted again. I messed up. I was scared of what people would think. I didn't want them to know we came from nothing. I thought leaving you behind would help me fit in. Precious posted a video. Fake tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, I was young, I was selfish. Please forgive me, Faith. You're the reason I exist. Junior was arrested a week later, caught in a campus protest turned violent. When journalists asked if he had any family, he whispered, only one person ever loved me, and we broke her. Faith watched all of it from her small room. Not with pride, not with joy, but with calm. Because she finally understood something most people never do. Forgiveness doesn't require reunion. She received an email a month later from a global foundation for women in science and leadership. Her name had been submitted by the Women's Center director. They were offering her a 2-year, fully sponsored fellowship in South Africa. Accommodation, monthly stipend, training and certification. Congratulations, the letter said. The world is waiting for your voice. Faith fell on her knees. She wept, but this time it was not from pain. On the day of her departure, Mama Grace walked her to the bus park. You are different now, the old woman said, smiling. No, I'm finally myself. She boarded the bus, phone in hand, suitcase in lap, journal in her bag. And just as the vehicle began to move, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Please don't forget me. Faith stared at the words, then looked outside the window at the road ahead. She did not reply. Because some people don't deserve a reply. They deserve your silence. The plane ascends above Lagos. Faith opens her notebook and writes, They took my voice. I made it louder. They left me behind. I moved ahead. I was never their stepping stone. I was the foundation they tried to bury. But they forgot. Seeds grow best underground. She closed her journal, lifted her eyes to the clouds, and whispered, I choose me now. If you were to be Faith, would you forgive your siblings or move on without them? Lessons from Faith's story. Never sacrifice your entire life for people who wouldn't do the same. Don't lose your identity while trying to hold others together. Not all forgiveness requires reconnection. Pain can bury you or plant you. Some betrayals are loud. The most dangerous ones wear your last name.